Thanks for joining us. Hopefully Lisa's going to come online with us as well. Hi, Lisa.
Hooray! Hi. Hello.
Very excited about this.
Yes.
It's our first go at doing an Instagram live. Normally, we have book clubs in schools, but obviously that's not possible right now.
Yeah.
Trying something else. We've been reading along. Obviously, it looks backwards. The Goldfish Boy for the last few weeks, with people posting questions on Instagram.
Yes.
And we're absolutely thrilled that you could join us for our last week of that. The questions went up this morning.
Yeah.
For you to a bit of a read along, a bit of a reading for us, some questions.
Yes, fantastic. No, I'm really pleased to join you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming. Do you want to do a bit of an intro about you?
Yes. So I came to writing quite late, to be honest. So the Goldfish Boy came out in 2017, so just a few years ago. And it was something I'd always wanted to do. I'd always wanted to be a writer, right from a very, very young age. And it took me until in my late 30s when I started to kind of take it more seriously. And I used to start trying to write a book and think it was too hard. I didn't think I could possibly write a whole book because my brain wasn't big enough to hold a whole book in one go. And then I read somewhere that you can just start with an idea and you don't have to know the ending, you don't have to know the middle, and you can just go for it. And that made a huge difference to me. So The Goldfish Boy was my first book, and then I went on to write some more. So I'll quickly show you my other books. The Light Jar came out the year after in 2018. The Day I Was Erased was after that one. And also last year, I wrote a short book. If you like short books, this is Owen and the Soldier. It's a novella. It's especially good if you're a reluctant reader, you want a quick read. If you've got dyslexia, it's dyslexia friendly. So that was a really enjoyable experience. And then this is my most recent one, The Boy Who Fooled the World, with its jazzy pages. So that came out early this year. So life kind of changed ever since The Goldfish Boy came out. That was the start of me becoming a professional writer, and doing something that I've always wanted to do and actually making it work.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. That's fantastic.
No?
We use those books as part of our book club. Both Goldfish Boy and Own the Soldier has been really, really popular because of the themes involved. I think that people can relate to them and they see a little bit of themselves in the book.
Yes.
So I think they've been useful. They've been really good book club books
Good.
for generation.
Good. I think especially for Owen and the Soldier, because you don't get many short books at the moment, do you? So if you can compare the two, I think books are getting longer and longer. I think The Goldfish Boy is probably my longest, but so it's nice to have a satisfying short book that you can get through as a class, or as you say, in book groups as well. It was lovely to write that book.
Brilliant. I found a few facts about you.
Okay.
So I'm going to try. I don't know if any of them are real. You know what it's like.
Okay.
So, what did you used to do for a living before you were a writer?
Well, I had rather a lovely job actually, and I fell into it accidentally. So I left school when I was 16. I didn't do A levels. I did an A level. I did A level English literature, but I did that. I was going to say online, but we didn't have online when I was 16. It was like a correspondence course. But I left when I was 16, and then when I worked in a local office, and a couple of years later I started working for the BBC in radio. So I worked for Radio 2. So I was there for about 11 years full time. And then I freelanced for Radio 4. So I've worked on lots of different radio programmes, music programmes, concerts, plays, documentaries, all sorts really. So, and all throughout that whole time, I was thinking, I really, really want to be an author, but not doing it. Like we all do, we kind of dream about it and not actually acting on it. But I also had the excuse in that I had a lovely job and I was quite happy where I was working, and so that was a sort of distracting me from writing, I guess.
Yeah, cool. That's what I had. So that's right then. That's perfect.
Yeah, good.
And what I thought we'd do now is if you'd like to read some of the Goldfish Boy for us, that'd be fantastic.
I won't read where are you up to out of interest? Do you read?
We've read all the way through. So this is the last week. So
yes, okay. Yeah, so I won't read anything, for people that haven't read it, I won't read anything that's a spoiler. I'm going to read a little way into the book. And for those of you who don't know, Matthew suffers with something called OCD. So he's really frightened of germs, and he's in his bedroom looking out the window. That's how he spends his days, is watching the world from his window. So we're going to join Matthew while he's looking out the window. Monday, the 28th of July, 12:47 p.m. Office. Very hot. Teddy is in the front garden next door. He's wearing a pull-up nappy and a white t-shirt with a cartoon ice cream on the front. He doesn't have any shoes on. There's no sign of Casey or Mr. Charles. The gate is shut, the small lever on the latch in place. Reaching towards some bright pink roses, Teddy picked a fistful of petals and scattered them onto the path, dancing as they tickled his sunburnt feet. A trowel and a green kneeling pad lay next to him. Mr. Charles must have been in the middle of some gardening. When he reappeared, he wasn't going to be happy with what Teddy was doing, not after all the hours he spent fiddling with those flowers. In his left hand, Teddy clutched the little square blue blanket he'd been holding when he first arrived in the big posh car with Casey. He let the blanket fall to the ground, then grabbed more petals and watched as they rained down on top of it. When the last petal dropped, he stretched towards a large rose, but caught his forearm on a thorn. "Ow!" he said, and he did a little jig as his face crumpled into a scowl. For a moment, I thought he was going to go and get Mr. Charles, but instead, he just squatted down and inspected the cut on his arm, dabbing at it with the blanket. I heard a door bang open, and Mr. Jenkins appeared from next door wearing his running gear and studying his iPod as he looped some white headphones around his neck. His teeth shined bright against his tan skin. He turned left out of his driveway, then broke into a jog, oblivious to the toddler crouching in the garden next to him. Teddy stood up. There was a tiny trickle of blood running down his arm, but it didn't seem to bother him. He reached for some more petals and then stopped. Something out of the corner of his eye had distracted him. Me. He turned and pointed a chubby arm at the window as he gasped, "Fishy!" I watched him bounce up and down, clearly ecstatic that he'd spotted the goldfish boy all on his own. He looked around for someone to tell. "Fishy, Casey! Look, Fishy, Grandad!" But nobody came. I turned away from the window and glanced at the time in the corner of the computer screen. 12:55 p.m. That time was important. I don't know why it stuck in my mind, but it did, even without writing it down. At some point after 12:55 p.m. on that bright, scorching day, Teddy Dawson went missing.
Good. It's a really good book, and it's a kind of really good book for what we're all currently going through as well.
Well, yes, I didn't plan this, but yeah, I've had lots of people saying I feel like Matthew watching out the window, because we're all watching our neighbours. Are they going out more than once a day and things like this? And and we have become these goldfish boys and girls in tanks, haven't we? Watching the world. And yeah, I've had a few questions, people asking me, how would Matthew feel at the moment? Would his anxieties be worse because of the situation, or would he feel that, oh, I've got an excuse, everybody's indoors, I can stay here without feeling judged? So I don't know. It's quite interesting, really.
Great, thank you for that.
No, thank you.
Got some questions. If anyone's got to ask some questions on Instagram, but we had I think we got one from Lucy that came in earlier, which was, how did you decide to write children's books rather than adult books?
I think what happened was, I think this is quite important. I wrote a book that I wanted to read myself, or that I would like to have read myself. And so I started out with the idea of someone who was, for some reason, in their room, didn't like to leave their room. And as I was writing the book, because the character was a younger person, it just felt that it would fit into children's books. So I think I didn't deliberately set out that I'm going to write a children's book. I just wrote a story, and it happened to fall into that category, really. I think that's probably, well, I don't know, I wonder if it's the best way to do it, because I have actually tried to write an adult's book, consciously thinking about it, and I'm writing it in such a different way, and I finding it quite hard. I think it's important to write something you want to write and then find out where it fits. So I kind of fell into writing children's books without, you know, kind of aiming for that, really. I'm pleased I did, but I wasn't really conscious of aiming for that market, really, or for younger readers.
So the story came first, and then that kind of
Definitely.
evolved.
Yeah, definitely. Story.
Matthew was a child rather than an adult, so that is
Yes.
how it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
And
really
I think
interesting.
I originally, actually, and this might interest your book club readers, that I wrote the book originally. Matthew was about 17. So it was in young adult, late teens category, really. And then when I got my publishing deal, my editor said, I think this will be brilliant for middle grade. So kind of the 8 to 13-year-old bracket. So I changed a lot of the, we just changed the ages and made it a little bit younger in that way. So.
Okay.
Mm.
Someone's just asked a question about how do you gain people's points of view? Do you do research, or how did you find out about OCD and how Matthew would feel?
Yeah, I did. I don't have any experience of OCD at all, and I didn't know anybody with OCD. So what happened was, when I thought of the idea of a boy who didn't want to leave his bedroom, I then thought, well, why doesn't he want to? And I just by chance happened to see a documentary on Channel 4 about OCD, and it was presented by the comedian John Richardson. And he looked in, because he thinks he might have a touch of OCD, and so he was looking into the sort of science behind it and the people it affected. And before I'd seen this documentary, I was very much naive, thinking you just washed your hands a bit more, you liked your, you know, one of those people that thought, oh, I was a little bit OCD, and it was almost a good thing sometimes. And then when I saw this documentary, I realized how wrong I was and how debilitating it could be, and how there was a lady on there, and John Richardson had gone round to interview her, and she changed her mind at the last minute. She wouldn't let me in the house. She said, you might have germs on you, I'm really sorry, you can't come in. And it was a real eye-opener. And when I saw that, I thought, right, that's what's happened to Matthew. And I then got in touch with a psychologist who deals mostly with young people with OCD, and had a really good few long chats with her about the condition, and that she's seeing it more and more in young people and high school age children, and read lots of books. There's lots of OCD forums online you can read. I read lots of notice boards that are public for everybody to read, and there's there's lots and lots of different forms of OCD. I went for the one that was probably the most easier to understand, with germs, but also touched on the number 13, where Matthew has a fear of the number, because I wanted to sort of show that there's more sides to this condition than people realise. There's lots of things that you wouldn't necessarily understand it as being OCD that are. And I think, going back to the question from Megan, I think what helps with writing about these serious subjects is writing it from a child's perspective. I think it's just easier to put myself in the position of the narrator to tell the story, and therefore hopefully I can feel more empathy for them. I have to do some research to start with, but when I'm typing their words, it kind of pitches it at their level and what they're seeing through their eyes, rather than me watching who doesn't know what's going on, or an older reader reading it. So I think that really helps, actually. And you do have to do some research. You do have to make sure. I was very nervous when The Goldfish Boy came out. And fortunately, I've had some really good reactions from people who have suffered with it, or have got family members who have. So it's worked well. But you have to be very careful. Sorry, that's a very long answer. Sorry.
Full answer. Thank you. Beth's got a question about, do you have a schedule for writing your books? Are you on a
Yeah, I should have a schedule. I try to. I'm not very good, and things have changed as we're all in lockdown. well, quite a lot has changed for me, but what's changed more than anything is that I've now got family around when I'm normally on my own, and we're limited in that we've got a limited amount of laptops in the house, and my children have to do work in the school. So I'm kind of juggling that at the moment. But what I used to do when my kids go off to school, I would try and write early in the day. I'm not very good later on. By the afternoon, I'm slumping and I'm tired. So my schedule, sometimes it's to try and aim for 1,000 words a day, or if I finding that's really hard, I set an alarm on my phone, or a timer for, say, half an hour. I'm not going to do anything apart from writing for this next half an hour. It might not sound like much, but I find sometimes you have to set yourself sort of strict rules to make yourself concentrate. I think a lot of us are finding this out when we're working from home. It's easy to be distracted, yeah. And so yes, I do try and keep us to a schedule, but that's gone a bit wrong at the moment.
I think all our schedules have gone a bit wrong, haven't they?
Yes.
A bit different. I think our dog particularly is struggling because we're all here all day, and normally I think he's confused.
Been taking it in turns to take him for a walk, so yeah. Or just slide.
Another question: what advice would you give to teenagers when planning creative writing? You're doing tips on a Monday, aren't you?
I am, yes. If you want to join me on a Monday at 9:30 a.m, I'll be doing writing tips every week. It really varies, I think, that you have to find your own, what works for you. So with planning, some people love planning and they will plan and plan and plan and not write the book. I'm one of the people that really wants to just get writing the book, and I really don't like planning. So with the Goldfish Boy, I didn't plan at all, and I got in a complete mess, and I didn't know what day of the week it was. I don't know where characters were, and I sort of regretted it when I was well into the book. But now what I do is the bare minimum of planning. So I think for your teen writer, I think that was for teenage writers, creative writing. If you've got somebody who's really doesn't like planning, I would suggest writing a synopsis. So one side of A4, they're really quite boring to read, synopsis. They kind of literally just say this happens, then that happens, then this happens. And it can just do it for yourself, so nobody else has to read it, but I do that. And I'm quite fortunate I've got an agent and an editor who can read that. And then sometimes, if I'm forced to, I do a chapter breakdown. So I literally will say, chapter 1, introduce Matthew, reveal the other characters in the close. Chapter 2, Matthew sees Jake, Jake's rude. Very, very rough guides, and you haven't got to stick to that. Remember, you can always change things, but that's a way to get going. And it's also kind of like a bit of a safety net. Sometimes I can be writing thinking, oh, I don't know what's going to happen next, and I can go back to my synopsis, I can look at the chapter breakdowns, and I can find where I am.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
They're really helpful tips, says Ruth. And there was another question I think came up earlier, was about whether you need to read to be able to write.
I think
read more books.
Yeah, I think you do. I think I read lots when I was a teenager. So kind of from the age, I wasn't particularly brilliant at school or anything, or a big reader. And then I hit probably age 11 or 12, and I suddenly just loved reading. I was reading everything. And there's so much choice now, isn't there, for readers? And I don't think there was when I was younger. It was Enid Blyton, and then it was into Stephen King. There wasn't really anything in the middle. It was no. So I did read lots of books that were probably far too old for me. So I read and read and read, and the books that I read at that age, that kind of 11 to 16 age, were the ones that really stick in your mind. I think those years, I'm sure there's some science behind it, but your brains are like sponges. You soak up so much information at that age, and I still use a lot of things that I've learned, or memories, or things I've witnessed at those ages in my books, just observations. And so yeah, from books, from things I've read, from films I've seen, from TV programs, I kind of, that's, and I still read now. I read lots of books, really, lots of different genres. I read adults books and children's books. I alternate between the two. You have to be in the mood for a book. You know, I have gone through weeks and weeks of not reading anything. I don't worry that I don't, but every now, yeah, I will have a book generally on the go, and audiobooks as well. That's something I've recently discovered.
Yeah, me
Because
too. And
I think
and it's
also you can read a book. I can read a book, like a paper book, and then I can listen to a different audiobook. So I can effectively read two at the same time, which I couldn't read two different books. No.
yeah, and I think sometimes with the audiobooks, it tends who's reading it as well makes a massive difference.
Oh, huge. Yes, I did. I was listening to a book recently, an adult's book, and it was a male narrator, but every time a woman spoke, he put on a voice like that. And I thought, I can't listen to this. So I had to stop, and it was such a good book. But yeah, so they can be easily spoiled by the narrators. Yeah.
Not even sure. I'm not sure how we're doing for time, really. I've really, but one more question was. But all right, fine. Do you carry a note with you? Are you one of those people writing notes as you wander around, sitting in, not sitting coffee, but previously?
Occasionally, if I got a blast of inspiration, I'd use my notebook on my phone. I don't like typing onto my phone particularly, but I do carry a notebook around. I'm a very scrappy notes taker. So I have a collection of notebooks, and I write something down, and then I pick up another one and write something in that. So, but that is a good thing to do, especially if you think, and I'm sure you've all experienced this, anyone who's ever tried to write something and you think, oh, I'll remember that, and then you won't, it will go, no matter how strong that memory is about something. 6 hours later, when you go to write it down, it will have gone. So just making a few notes helps. Definitely. Or dreams that you've had that you wake up and think that will be good, and you make a few notes. So yeah, I'm not very good. I think it's because I enjoy typing more than I do writing or typing onto a phone. So I rarely handwrite notes. There's something to do with the connection in the brain and actually typing on a laptop, I think. So sometimes I might make some notes on the computer, but obviously you don't have your laptop with you all the time.
Ben had an interesting question about did people interpret your books in a way you didn't think they would?
That's a really good question. Sometimes there's some people, I don't know if any of you have read The Boy Who Fooled the World, which is out now, and it's about it's really hard to talk about a lot of my books because they have twists in them, but it's a boy who fools the world, and he does something. It's really hard. I'm trying to have to try and word it. And the teacher got in touch with me to say her students thought that the boy had done this thing accidentally, and she believed he'd done it deliberately. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting take on it. I won't say which way I wrote it, but that was two different takes. Yeah, I think lots of people see things in books that I didn't really notice were there, which is lovely, which is really lovely, and symbolism and things. I think that's been really interesting as a writer. You don't know how much of it is luck, that you just happen to have said the right thing, how much of it's kind of going on in your subconscious that might come out in the book. But I haven't, most people seem to interpret them in a similar way, I think. Yeah, and they feel different kind of get upset, because most of my books have got a little bit of sadness in them. So yeah, I do hear lots about and when somebody said that they've cried, I'm like, yes, which is really mean, but it means that it's touched them really well. So
yeah, I definitely cried Owen and the Soldier, and
yes.
I was reading it on a bus as well, which is not the best place to have a little sobbing moment.
No, that seems to be the one about that. Yeah, the one that seems to be the one that's hit people really with the emotions at the end. And I think I cried actually when I do cry when I write the books, and you know when that's working, when you start to feel the emotion. I cried when I finished The Goldfish Boy, and a couple of scenes in there, and then definitely that Owen reading his poem set me off. So that's always a good sign. You know it's working. You know the writing's working. Yeah.
If it's real and people can people feel a real emotion from it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. What's that? Yeah, well, I had one more question. Was did you have a favourite book when you were growing up? You said you did lots of reading between being 11 and 16. Is there one that you go back to, or that's
I
your
rarely,
favourite?
yeah, I rarely go back to books. And I know somebody asked me recently, do I keep, how many books have I got at home? But I tend to read them and pass them on. I never really keep them and reread them. The only books that I've reread are Charlotte's Web, which I've
Yeah,
kind of talked about quite a lot, because that was the first book to make me cry. And I remember thinking, I can't believe a book has made me cry. How's this happened? Just a book, it's made me cry. And I remember finishing that and then starting it from the beginning and reading it all again. And then the books that I loved 101 Dalmatians. I loved Watership Down is a book I'd like to reread, because I think when I read that I was probably too young and a lot of it went over my head with Watership Down. So I think it's probably I need to check this, but I think it's actually an adult's book, isn't it? Watership Down, even though it's
yeah,
people think it's bunnies, and yeah, I think it is more
yeah. I think
adult.
the in it, aren't they? Because they're
Yes,
leaving their
yeah,
and those.
yeah, and I
So,
think
but I think sorry, go on.
no, I was going to say, I think a lot of the reason I don't reread books, it sounds awful, but I think there's so many books to read. I'd want to read another one, a different one. But I know people that will go back to a book for comfort or as reassuring, but I do that, I think, with films more. I can rewatch films all the time, but books I can't really reread many. I think there's a handful I've reread, but they're mostly adults books, not children's books. Or somebody's just saying, I love 101 Dalmatians too. I think Dodie Smith is a lovely writer. Yeah, sometimes I remember them. I'd love to read books that I read as a child now to see if they're as good as I remember them. Maybe
Yeah,
that's not a good
I
thing.
no. Well, I've done a little bit of that with Alan Garner. I
Oh,
reread The Weirdstone, and they stand up
do
as
they?
kind of re
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I did try and read some of the younger books to my children, but there was so much. There's so much out now, isn't there, for them, that they wanted to go for those ones rather than the old-fashioned ones that I was. Although obviously Roald Dahl's lasted the test of time, isn't it? Yeah.
There was a good question there about whether you'd like to see your books as movies.
Oh yes, I would absolutely love to. I think every author probably would. And I kind of got close with the Goldfish Boy. It came quite close to TV. TV were interested, and then at the very last minute, it didn't happen. You never say never, because I think these things come back. But I think the one that I would love to see as a film would be The Light Jar. I think that could be quite good, and there could be, because it's about imaginary friends, and I think you could use some good CGI in that, and yeah, really go to town. If Spielberg's watching, then that's fine.
Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Max had another question about whether your children like reading. That's a tricky question.
Oh, Max, do you know what? My children aren't watching this, so I can say that I'm embarrassed to say no. And I really, really beg. My son, he's nearly an adult now, so he read and read and read and read. And what was wonderful about when you're a parent or a teacher and your children or your classroom are reading and you recommend each books to each other, hopefully you do that. And my son used to recommend books to me and I used to recommend them back. I've read lots of books that I would never have picked up because of my son. And then he got to about 14 and stopped reading. But he loves films, so he loves stories in other ways. He's quite into gaming, and gaming has lots and lots of brilliant stories, and he will tell me the plots of games he's played. My daughter reads, but I wouldn't say she's a really, really keen reader, but she does always have a book on the go on her bedside, but it will be the same book for a few months. So she'll kind of plod her way through it. I think also there's so much distraction now, isn't there, for younger people? And we didn't, when I was, saying when I read and read and read, there wasn't a great deal else to do apart from watching television. There wasn't YouTube, there wasn't it wasn't gaming particularly, and yeah, but reading is when you're reading, for me, you're making your own movie in your head, and I think that's just brilliant. If you're reading a really good book, you could be the director in your head of how it looks, and that's for me the wonderful thing about books.
Yeah. And are you in a book club? Do you have
I
a book
am,
club
yes.
that
I
you're?
just saw that from Beth. I am in a book club, yes. So I've recently started a book club. So just with about 5 or 6 of us. We moved to Suffolk about 7 years ago. So I was in a book club where I used to live. And then here I've just started a book group. And it's really good because it makes you read books that you wouldn't normally pick up. I've read a lot of non-fiction that I don't really read. And then, yeah, that's quite new to me. So that's what I love about book clubs. And you might judge, we all judge books by their covers, don't we? You think, I wouldn't pick that up. And then you can suddenly discover this book is brilliant and you would never have known. So book clubs are brilliant, I think, really good.
Yeah, and the chance to talk about a book and get other people's views and
Yeah.
ideas is, because
Yes,
I sometimes completely change my mind about a book when I've talked about it with other people as well.
I do as well. Yes. Yeah. And I'm very good at forgetting what's happened in books as well. And some people read books and they absorb it all. And I've forgotten the characters' names. I can't remember. So, yeah. And I'm reading a really long, saying about my childhood, I've gone back to Stephen King and I'm reading a really, really thick book. And that's very different for me because I normally think, oh no, I could read 3 books in a time it's going to take me to read that really long one. And so I'm enjoying immersing myself into a really long book. I think it's important to try different things as well when you're reading. Mm. Reading. Mm.
Is that a scary Steve?
No,
Scary Steve
it's
book?
not. No, here's some of his older books. I remember reading lots of them. There's one about vampires that I remember reading when I was about 15, and I finished the book and I turned my light off, and it was a complete case of jumping under the covers. And again, like Charlotte's Web, I couldn't believe that a book had been so powerful that it made me scared. How can you frighten yourself from reading a book? But this one's time traveling, so it's not scary so far. Yeah, it's good though.
This is a scary twist.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
yes.
I think that's
Lovely.
brilliant. I think that lots of time doing that. Thank you so much for being our
No,
very
you're
first.
welcome. No, anytime. It's been lovely.
Uh, yeah, wish you well with all your writing. And as we said earlier, you can join Nick. You can join you on Monday at
Yeah.
9:30 back at your Instagram account, can't you?
Yes, yeah. Monday at 9:30. Is it what,
Is
sorry?
that Lisa Writes?
Yes, at Lisa Thompson writes. And I know lots of people are doing Joe Wicks. So there's always, I kind of hang around for 5 minutes before we start. So don't worry if you're doing Joe Wicks, I'll wait for you. That'll be fine.
Brilliant.
Lovely.
That's amazing.
Great. Thank
Thank
you
you
very
so
much.
much.
No, thank you. Thanks for
And
having me.
thanks for everyone who came and joined in.
Lovely.
Brilliant.
Take care.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.